Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched In the Heights. Let's talk about it. So In the Heights is a movie musical that is directed by John M. Chu, who also directed, among other things, Crazy Rich Asians, and this film also features music from the man, the myth, the legend, Lin-Manuel Miranda, of course, of Hamilton fame. Now, going back to John M. Chu and his work, one of the things that I really loved and appreciated about Crazy Rich Asians was the vibrancy in his work, the way that he really created an aesthetic for the worlds that he created for Crazy Rich Asians, really showing us the lavishness and the vibrancy, the wealth that was on display there. And I think that's something he's very much adopted and adapted in order to suit the story of In the Heights. And that is one of the aspects of the film that I appreciated the most, because some of these visuals and some of these ideas that he brings to the big screen here are so fascinating. They're so energetic and lively. They really breathe a new life to this musical that first originated on the stage, and they really make use of this new medium that they're working with in the film in order to create something magical. And that's something that I've often spoken of in this channel, especially when reviewing films like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and One Night in Miami, which were both stage plays originally, is that when you're dealing with another medium like film, there are so many things that you can do because you don't face the same restrictions that you do when you're working with just the stage. And I really appreciate the fact that John M. Chu took advantage of that by giving us some really creative musical numbers that you wouldn't possibly be able to do on stage. For example, we have people walking on walls, literally dancing on walls, dancing on New York fire escapes. Okay, we have that whole swimming pool sequence. All of these things that we can't really manifest on the stage, he brings to the big screen so well in such a vibrant and interesting and energetic way. And like I said, I really appreciate the imagination that's on display here, the ingenuity that's on display. And I think it perfectly reflects the imagination of the dreamers that live in Washington Heights, because the story here focuses on the dreamers, focuses on the residents of Washington Heights who are largely from the Latin American community. Now, what's really special about this story is that, first of all, it highlights the Latin American community to begin with, because let's face it, that is rare, that is painfully rare to see in American media, and we love to see it more here. But secondly, it's also the fact that we have these kind of immigrants who are coming in from all of these Latin American countries, from Puerto Rico, from Mexico, from the Dominican Republic, and they're coming in with these hopes and dreams of living out the best life that they possibly can, creating a whole new life for themselves and following their dreams and aspirations in New York. And we get to see the kind of painful and sometimes really difficult realities of that, and when you're not really able to live up to that. And similarly to what I touched on in my review of Lupin, I do think that this is like a very universal theme to touch on. No matter what country you come from, you're going to have immigrants there. You're going to have immigrants there, despite what some propaganda might suggest. Okay, every single country has them. And so these themes of wanting a better life for yourself and for your children and future generations, and wanting to create something special and larger than life in a whole different country, is something that a lot of people around the world can relate to. But I really appreciate the fact that this film hones in on the Latin American experience in America, and specifically in New York. Now, whilst, like I said, this film does very much focus on the difficulties and the sadness and tragedy that surrounds a lot of immigrants who aren't able to make it, who aren't able to live out the dreams that they imagined when they first arrived to New York, it really does balance it out with the feeling of community and family. Okay, celebration of the Latin American community that we see on display here is incredible. And that's what really balances out, is that it's not just poverty porn, basically. It's not just woe is me, my life sucks, although we'll get to that in a second when it comes to certain characters. But it's also being able to acknowledge, like, maybe I wasn't able to achieve certain things in my life that I saw for myself when I first came here, but I have been able to meet these incredible people. I've been able to connect with people from all over Latin America, and we've created a family, a community that is worth standing up for, that is worth fighting for, even against the forces, the evil forces of, yes, gentrification. Speaking of Netflix series, that's something that I touched on recently when it came to the Netflix series Zero out of Italy. But yes, there are themes of gentrification here and how that has increased prices in the area, how that's driven away a lot of natives to that area who were there for generations but can no longer afford to stay there. And it's very much changed the demographic of that area as a result. And so yes, you do have the Latin American people who have made a life in Washington Heights just kind of think and reflect at how that has changed so much in the recent years due to gentrification. But at the same time, they still have that resilience. They still have that energy and strength to say, no, we have this community here. It is worth standing up for, fighting for, and most importantly, in some cases, celebrating even during the most difficult times. And boy, do some of these characters face some very difficult times, because again, we see parallels between this film and the series that I mentioned, Zero out of Italy, where in Washington Heights you have this kind of blackout where there's no access to electricity for a few days, and this is at the peak of summer, so it's like hell. Like it's like literally hell. Like, just burn me alive then. That would be easier to deal with than this literal hell that is living in New York with no electricity. Especially in the case of America, which heavily relies on air conditioning. Here in the UK we don't have that, but you Americans, no air conditioning, death, just dying. Okay, so you have this horrible circumstance in the peak of summer, and people are just out of it. People are tired. It feels like you're fighting every single element in your life, and it's just exhausting, both, you know, mentally and also physically, of course. But then you have that injection of energy, that injection of love and celebration still in those difficult times, especially from the matriarchs of these communities. I couldn't help but notice. Of course, we have Abuela Claudia, who is a staple in this community. She is the matriarch of these people, and they respect her and look up to her because of the sacrifices that she's made for so many of the younger generation in this community. But then we also have Daniela, who comes in and reminds people, even when they're tired, even when they're feeling down on their luck, that, you know, they are from a strong background. They are from strong people who have lived through horrors, the horrors of colonialism, the slave trade, all of that. And so they can handle a little bit of heat. Okay, she said, I never imagined that I would ever see the day when Latin Americans couldn't handle heat. And so you have this huge dance number that breaks out afterwards. But it's just about having that inflection of energy and strength, you know, having these key people in that community to remind you of who you are, where you come from, and how you're capable of achieving and living through so much. Okay, so I can't go any further into this review without acknowledging one of the most important elements to a movie musical. Okay, arguably the most important element, that is the songs. Okay, the music. Now, I will preface this by saying I've never claimed to be the biggest musical fan. Okay, like when it comes to musicals, I'm very hit or miss. It's a very complicated situation. I mentioned this most recently in my review of Lucifer, where I said that I hate musical episodes and shows that are otherwise not musicals. That's a strong hate. Okay, that's a strong rejection. Okay, but then there are other circumstances like live action musicals like this, where it's a bit, you know, of a mixed situation. I love Chicago. I love Moulin Rouge. There are certain musicals that I very much have enjoyed. And of course, in the case of animation, like, I have no issue with musical animation. I'm trying to procrastinate. I don't know if you can tell, but we finally have to come to the reality. I don't like the songs in this film. I don't like the songs in this film. Listen, Lin-Manuel Miranda is an icon, a legend. No one is taking anything away from him, not in this household. Please, please don't misread the situation. Don't get it twisted. If you want to hear my thoughts on Hamilton, you can check out my review from last year where I reviewed the Disney Plus filming of the show with the original cast. But yeah, like Lin-Manuel Miranda, please, like he's earned the Tonys, he's earned all of the awards that he has. We're not disputing that, okay? But when it comes to In the Heights, I personally didn't feel like there was a song that was particularly memorable to me. It's highly possible that if I, listen to the soundtrack on repeat, that there will of course be songs that I would catch on to. But otherwise, just on first viewing, a lot of the music is very like theatre, in that they're explaining what's happening in their lives through song, and I just find that a little bit cheesy. Like it doesn't always agree with me, guys. I'm so sorry. So yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of some of the music in this film. I didn't find it to be particularly memorable. It's not like, again, I mentioned this previously, but it's not like The Greatest Showman where every single song is a bop. That was another musical where I was like, damn, like every single song is a bop, really? There's a reason why the soundtrack for The Greatest Showman was trending on iTunes for so long, because it was excellent. Because it was simply divine. And I just don't feel like it's the case with the music in The Heights, even though I very much appreciate the fact that a lot of the music is very Latin American inspired. I love the inflection of Latin American music in this soundtrack, and those were the better songs in my opinion. My issue was with the, kind of explaining what you're doing or explaining what's going on in the scene through song. Those sorts of songs, or that part of these songs, wasn't my favorite. Now there is quite a bit of the classic sing/talking/rapping that Lin-Manuel Miranda is known for in his music, and I like that style. We see a lot of that in like Moana and of course in Hamilton. I like it, okay, I'm a fan of it, but there was something about the songs here that just didn't quite connect with me. So next up, let's talk about the cast. Let's talk about the characters themselves. Now, for the most part, I really enjoyed each of the characters in this film. I think they were all very vibrant. I think they were all very, three-dimensional, especially considering how large this cast is. To be able to give each individual character really likable personalities that stand out is a chore, okay, it's a task. But I do think that the film, for the most part, really succeeded in that. Of course, at the center, though, we do have Anthony Ramos's character, who's called Usnavi, which is like so creative. When you hear the origin of his name, the fact that his father saw a ship that belonged to the US Navy and decided to call his son Usnavi, that is like so adorable. That's so endearing. But I really enjoyed this character. He's the kind of character who's chasing after his father's dream almost. I mean, there is a lot of that, of parental pressures and the dreams of your forefathers and the people who came before you, and how that would affect how you try to move in your own life. And I do feel like for a lot of the film, he is dictated by what he thought was his father's dream and how he wanted to honor his father in order to bring that dream to life. I feel like that was leading a lot of the decisions that he made for the majority of the film. But then by the end, he realizes that, New York is his home. Like, this is where he belongs. He's made a life for himself here, and maybe going back to the Dominican Republic isn't something that he necessarily feels like he has to do. I liked his character overall quite a bit. I am a fan of Anthony Ramos. I think he's incredibly talented. I was first introduced to his work in She's Gotta Have It, actually, the Netflix series by Spike Lee, which I have issues with. I have issues with that show, okay, but he's not one of them. I think he's great. And of course, from Hamilton, he was one of the original cast members there, so there's that connection to Lin-Manuel Miranda. I will say though, there's one character that I really disliked, okay, that I really wasn't a fan of. It would be Vanessa. I don't understand the character of Vanessa at all. Like, why? No. I really didn't like her. I found her to be whingy. I found her to be whiny. I understand what they were going for with this character. Each of these characters in this film kind of represent a struggle that people who are immigrants in a country can relate to. So I understand understand that they were going for this character who feels like she's so behind on her life. She also had this dream, but she feels so far away from it, like she wasn't able to accomplish it, and now she's working in this salon as a nail technician, and that's just not where she wanted to be at this point in her life, and so she feels very dissatisfied. On top of that, we're also touching on the gentrification theme here, where she's trying to get a new apartment, she's trying to move up in, you know, New York society, but she feels like she's restricted because a lot of the steps in order to move up are, you know, reserved for the privileged. They're reserved for people who have, for example, parents who can sign off on leases as guarantors, and these parents' salaries are like 40 times that of the rent itself, which is already expensive. So you already know what kind of people would fit into that category of people who would be allowed to elevate their social status in New York. So there is some very interesting social commentary that is explored through the character of Vanessa, but it's a shame that the character herself is so unlikable to me. She's so unlikable to me. First of all, because in my opinion, society has progressed past the need for the reluctant female love interest. No more. I understand that there's this fascination with incredibly attractive women who are pursued by incredibly attractive men in these films, who are like reluctant to their advances. They're like, oh no, like please stop. They're constantly playing chicken, basically. I understand that there's a fascination amongst some, not over here, not in this household. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing it, especially because it's always the woman. Because if it's the other way around, the woman would be called desperate. Like if she kept pursuing a man who was so not into her, she would be called desperate. But because it's the man, because it's Anthony Ramos who's like, yeah, I really like her, and you know, he's really eager to be with her. Meanwhile, she's nonchalant, she's distant with him, she's hot and cold with him, which is worse. It's kind of deemed as socially acceptable. Not to me. No more. I'm over it, okay? I would much rather see a love story with two enthusiastic love interests who are getting together, trying to make it work. And even if there are some other boundaries or issues in their relationship, because of course we need to have an arc, right? We need to have a journey. It can't all just be fine and dandy. Let it be something else other than the woman being reluctant to date the guy. Like, let it be something else. The fact that he was going to move away to begin with was already enough of a conflict for them. She didn't also need to be so hot and cold towards him. Now, another character that I wanted to spotlight, who I actually really enjoyed the portrayal of, was the character of Nina. I really loved the exploration of this kind of character, especially because I guess I can relate to it wholeheartedly. Wholeheartedly. But Nina, of course, is the one who was able to get out, okay? She, of course, has immigrant parents and her father is still alive, and he has a lot of expectations for her because she was so clever, because she was such a high achiever from the jump, from when she was really young. And now that's come to fruition. She's gotten into Stanford, a very prestigious university in America, and so her father sees in her so much hope for the future. He sees his dreams for himself and for her coming to fruition by the fact that she's going to this prestigious university that will inevitably open so many more doors for her than the rest of the community can even imagine. And so he has that enthusiasm, he has that hope in his daughter, and he's ready to sacrifice so much in order to make this happen, in order to make this possible. He's selling parts of his business for the money for her tuition, and you definitely get the sense that her father is so invested in her life and in her possible future career, and all of that pressure has just weighed her down, especially because going to Stanford wasn't exactly the dream come true that she envisioned it to be. She was faced with a lot of prejudice, a lot of discrimination there, and some really disheartening experiences have left a bad taste in her mouth to the whole university experience. And when she returns home during the sequence of events in this film, she's ready to drop out. I think she already has dropped out even, because of those negative experiences that she had in Stanford. Now, like I said, I can very much relate to the feeling of, you know, getting a lot of pressure from immigrant parents, from African parents, who want to see all of the hopes and desires that they had for their lives be manifested in you and realized in you. It is a lot of pressure, and that's why I appreciated the inclusion of a character like Nina. That's something that is scarcely discussed, and I really love the fact that this film explored that through her character. And ultimately, I was very happy that she made the decision to go back to Stanford, realizing that the opportunity to go to this prestigious university, to graduate from there, to open all of these doors in terms of her future careers was, you know, far greater, far more important than the several setbacks that she may have faced due to prejudice and discrimination and people's ignorance. I love the fact that she rose above that, and she, through her father's advice, was able to see the bigger picture. I do think it would have been a huge shame if she had succumbed to people's ignorance and had prevented herself from being able to open all of those doors that could potentially lead to her making the necessary nationwide changes that she wanted to see. Now, if there was one critique that I would bring up when it comes to this film, is that even though I very much appreciate the celebration of Latin American culture, I think it's absolutely phenomenal. We see all of these different flags flying during the musical sequence, the Mexican flag, the Dominican Republic flag, the Cuban flag. It's just a beautiful sight to behold. I will say, I couldn't help but notice that the film kind of perpetuates the idea that everyone who's Latin American could pass a paper bag test. Listen, I'm not going to pretend like I have intimate knowledge of this community or these cultures whatsoever, because I do not. But from what I do know, there are a lot of racial issues when it comes to a lot of these Latin American communities. People with deeper skin tones are seen as inferior. There's also this idea of like marrying up in order to elevate your race, basically meaning marrying people who are of lighter skin tones so that your children and grandchildren, etc., will be lighter skin toned as well and won't have the Afrocentric features and the kinky hair. That is a major issue in these communities, and I wish the film had tried to address that by getting some darker skinned Latin American people to be represented as part of this community. We do have the dark skinned man, we do have the dark skinned male love interest that Nina ends up getting with. But let's face it, in a lot of cases, this discrimination disproportionately affects women, and we see that through the lack of dark-skinned women in this film. Again, I'm treading carefully because I'm not as intimately knowledgeable about this community or these communities, but it's safe to say, like, there's a reason why we see a dark-skinned man and not a dark-skinned woman in this film. I just couldn't help but notice that as someone who can directly relate. So with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving In the Heights a 7.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on In the Heights, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this film down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!